David sat by the window, looking out at the desolate, rocky surface of the planet below. He'd spent 3 long years on this mission, far from Earth, far from his family and the life he once knew. He'd fixed systems, repaired broken machinery, and fought off alien invaders. Day after day, he worked to make sure the colony survived, but now it was over. The lights were stable, the shields were working, and the colony was safe. His job was done. He let out a long breath. It had been exhausting, mentally and physically draining. His heart longed for home, to feel the warmth of Earth's sun again, to walk on familiar soil. He was ready to go back, ready to forget this alien planet, the strange creatures, and the battles he had fought. David packed his bag with the same tired routine he'd followed for weeks now. His fingers moved mechanically, grabbing items without thinking. His shuttle was waiting for him. The Earth team had arranged for a pickup, and he had nothing left to do but leave. He'd done his part, and he would return as a hero. There was no reason to stay longer. But then, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. A strange, icy chill filled the air. David froze mid-packing, feeling the temperature drop sharply. The walls of the room seemed to shimmer. He blinked, unsure if he was seeing things, but there she was. The alien queen. She stood in the doorway, her presence overpowering. Her towering figure radiated an eerie light, casting a cold glow across the room. Her skin was an icy blue, smooth and almost shimmering like crystal. Silver armor covered her body, designed with sharp, angular patterns that seemed to reflect the faint glow of her power. David's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary alien. She was the leader of the forces that had fought against humanity, the one who had been a symbol of destruction and terror. Yet now she stood before him, silently watching, her golden eyes locking onto his. She stepped forward, and for a moment David felt the room close in on him. The air felt thick, almost impossible to breathe. He wanted to back away, to run, but something kept him rooted in place. This was the moment he'd been preparing for during all his training, standing face to face with the enemy. But it was nothing like he imagined. And then she spoke. "Stay." Her voice was calm, smooth, and soft. It wasn't the voice of an enemy. There was no threat in her words, no demand or anger. It was simply a request, a single word hanging in the air like a question. David's mind raced. Stay. Stay here on this cold, alien planet, with her. His job was over, and now he had a chance to go back home, to leave all of this behind. He'd done his duty. He had survived. He opened his mouth to speak, to refuse, to explain that he had to leave, but his words faltered. There was something about her, something in the way she stood there, her posture regal yet broken, that stopped him. The Queen's golden eyes held a quiet sadness, something David hadn't expected to see in an enemy. This wasn't the powerful, ruthless creature he had imagined. This wasn't a conqueror. She looked tired. David took a step back, still unsure of what to do. She wasn't asking for a fight. She wasn't demanding anything. She simply wanted him to stay. "I'm leaving," David finally said, his voice more forceful than he intended. "The mission over. My job is done." She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even seem to react. Instead, she took another step closer, and for the first time, David saw her face in full. Beneath her armor, her features were sharp but graceful. There was an otherworldly beauty to her, but it was a beauty laced with sorrow and loss. "You think your job is done?" Her voice was softer now, almost like she was speaking to herself. David swallowed hard, his emotions tangled. What did she mean by that? Had he misunderstood? Was there more to his mission than he realized? He opened his mouth again, but before he could speak, she raised a hand. Not to threaten, but to stop him. "Please," she said, her tone now pleading. "I need your help. We need your help." David's chest tightened. He wasn't sure what she meant, but the weight of her words pressed down on him. She wasn't asking for a fight. She wasn't asking for destruction. She was asking for something entirely different. In that moment, everything inside David screamed to leave, to go home and never look back. But there was something in her eyes, a raw, vulnerable honesty that stopped him. He could walk away, but would he be able to live with the choice? He felt the pull of a new, unknown path. A path that wasn't about war or survival, but something deeper. And in that instant, David realized that maybe, just maybe, his job wasn't done after all. David stood there frozen, his mind racing. The Queen's golden eyes were locked on his, her expression calm but full of something he couldn't quite understand. She was the leader of the alien forces. She had once been the very face of humanity's fear, the one who had led an army against Earth. Yet now, standing before him, she seemed different. Her words hung in the air, "Stay." David's heart thudded in his chest. He had fought so hard to survive, to protect humanity from her kind. His mission had been clear: fight, survive, and return home. That was the job, but now the job wasn't so clear anymore. The war was over. The battles had been won. Or had they? The room felt colder than ever. His instincts screamed at him to leave. This wasn't his fight anymore. The mission was done, and he had his ticket back home. Earth was waiting for him. He had a life waiting for him. He promised himself that he would never be dragged into another war, that he would escape the horrors of space and return to peace. But as he looked at the Queen, something inside him shifted. Her presence was unsettling, yes, but there was something else there, something human. Beneath the armor, beneath the icy exterior, she wasn't just an alien queen. She was a leader, a mother, a being who had fought for her people just as David had fought for his. And in that moment, he saw her not as an enemy, but as something more. The silence stretched on. She hadn't moved. She wasn't demanding anything from him. Her posture was almost pleading. Not in the way of a conqueror, but in the way of someone who had been through too much and was now asking for help, for understanding. It was a quiet desperation that David had seen before in people who had been through hell and back. He took a deep breath. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice shaking slightly. It wasn't fear he felt, at least not the fear of dying or being defeated. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of something he couldn't control. "I need your help to save my people," she said softly, her voice laced with sorrow. There was no anger, no edge. She wasn't angry at him for the war. She wasn't angry that her people had lost. She was tired. She had fought for her world, for her species, but now she was facing a loss too great to bear alone. David blinked. "Save them," he repeated, confusion spreading through him. "From what? The war is over, your people lost." Her gaze didn't falter. "Yes, we lost, but the war is not the only thing that can destroy us. Our world is dying. The damage we did to ourselves, to our environment, it is beyond repair. We need your knowledge. We need your help to heal, to rebuild." David's mind swirled. He didn't know what to think. He had been trained to fight, to destroy. He had been trained to fix machines and fight alien invaders. But this was something different. This wasn't about combat or strategy. This was about saving lives. The Queen, this powerful, fearsome leader, was asking him for help. He could see it now, the cracks in her icy armor, not physical cracks, but the cracks in her spirit. She was no longer the enemy. She was a ruler who had lost everything and was trying to rebuild, to give her people a future. "But why me?" David asked. "I'm just a technician, a soldier. I don't know how to fix this." He gestured toward the vast, empty space beyond the walls of the colony. "I'm not a healer. I don't have the knowledge you need." "You do," she said, taking a small step toward him. "Your people, your kind, you have knowledge we do not. You have learned how to fix what was broken, how to heal the damage done. I've seen it. I've watched how your people rebuild after war, after loss. You don't give up. You find a way." David's chest tightened at her words. It was true. Humans had been through so much: wars, destruction, collapse, but they had always rebuilt. They had always found a way to move forward. He had seen it himself in the way Earth had recovered after the Great Wars, in the way people had come together to heal. But that was Earth. This was not his world, and these were not his people. He didn't owe them anything. He had a life waiting for him, a life of peace and normalcy. Yet here he was, standing before a queen who had once been his enemy, now asking him to stay, to give up his peaceful life for something that was entirely unknown. The decision weighed heavily on him. He felt the pressure, the pull of duty, and the weight of history pressing down on him. He had spent so many years fighting to survive, to protect humanity. But now he was being asked to protect something else, to help a species rebuild, to heal a planet, to help the very people who had once been his enemy. David's heart raced, his hands shook. The tug of his home, of Earth, called to him, but something else called to him too, the Queen's quiet desperation, the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't asking for a war. She wasn't asking for more death. She was asking for help. For the first time, David wasn't sure what the right choice was. He wanted to run, to leave, to forget this alien world and go home. But in his heart, he knew that wasn't the person he wanted to be. He didn't want to run away from a chance to do something that mattered, something bigger than himself. He took a step forward, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you need me to do?" David stood there, the weight of her words sinking deep into him. "What do you need me to do?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. It felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't wake up from. He had imagined this moment countless times before, standing face to face with the enemy, ready to fight or flee. But this was different. The Queen wasn't an enemy anymore. She wasn't even a threat. She was a broken leader seeking help. The room around them was silent, the air thick with the tension of unspoken truths. The colony was still, as if even the walls knew the significance of what was happening. David's mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. How had he gone from planning his return home to standing here, offering his help to the alien queen? Her golden eyes never left him, and she seemed to wait for his decision, as if she already knew what he was going to say. "You think you can help us?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost hopeful. David hesitated. "I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to heal a planet," he said, shaking his head slowly. "I'm just one man. I can't fix everything. I don't even know where to start." She stepped closer, her presence calming, yet still filled with power. Her voice was gentle, yet carried a deep strength. "You don't have to fix everything. You have the knowledge to help us start. You know how to rebuild what's been broken. You humans, you're survivors, I've seen it. I've watched your species come back from loss after loss, each time stronger. We need that strength now, your strength." David felt his heart twist. She wasn't asking for a miracle. She wasn't asking for him to solve all their problems in an instant. She was asking him to help them start again, to offer the same hope and resilience that humanity had shown time and time again. It was a simple request, but it was one that carried so much weight. He could walk away now, go back to Earth, forget all of this. Or he could stay, offer his help, and try to heal a planet that had been ravaged by its own mistakes. "I can't promise anything," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'll try, I'll stay, if it's what you need." The Queen's gaze softened, and for the first time he saw a flicker of relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "You don't know how much this means to us." David nodded, though his mind was still spinning. He didn't know how to help. He didn't know where to begin. But one thing was clear: he couldn't leave now. Not when there was someone who needed him. The Queen led him out of the small room into the heart of the colony. The corridors were dim, the walls lined with strange alien technology that David had never fully understood. It had been his job to keep things running, to maintain the equipment, but now that same technology seemed like a puzzle he wasn't sure how to solve. They passed a group of alien workers, their faces tired and weathered. They didn't look at him with hostility, but with curiosity. It was as if they had seen too much pain to care about him as an enemy anymore. They knew what it was like to lose everything, just as humanity had. They were all survivors now, bound by a shared history of loss and the hope of something better. The Queen stopped in front of a large, glass-like structure. It was like nothing David had ever seen before, an alien garden, full of plants and flowers that glowed faintly in the dim light. The plants seemed to pulse with a life of their own, but many of them were withering, their colors fading. The air was thick with the scent of decay. "This is our last chance," the queen said softly. "Our world is dying, David. The environment is collapsing. The resources we rely on are disappearing, and without help we won't survive." David's heart clenched. He had seen ruined cities on Earth, places where entire populations had been wiped out by war, famine, or disease. But this was different. The destruction here wasn't just physical. It was a slow death, a quiet unraveling that was happening right in front of his eyes. The plants were dying, and with them, the hope of the colony. "You can help us, David," the queen continued, her voice steady despite the desperation in her words. "You know how to fix things. You know how to rebuild, to find solutions. Please, help us save what little we have left." David stared at the dying garden, his thoughts racing. He had spent so much of his life fighting, surviving, protecting. He had never thought about what came after the fight. What came after the war was over, after the machines were fixed, after the shields were up, after the battles were won. Could he really help these people? Could he give them the hope they needed to rebuild, to grow, to heal? He didn't know. He had never been trained for this. But as he looked at the queen, he realized something. Maybe he didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe, just maybe, the most important thing was simply to try, to give them a chance. He took a deep breath and turned to her. "All right, I'll help you. We'll start with this garden. If we can save this, maybe it will give your people hope. We'll find a way." The queen nodded, her eyes glistening with something he hadn't expected, gratitude. "Thank you, David. You don't know how much this means to us." David didn't know how they would fix everything, how they would save her world, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just staying for her. He was staying for the chance to make a real difference, to give something back after all the destruction and pain he had seen. He wasn't going home yet, and somehow he was okay with that. David spent the next few days trying to adjust to the weight of his decision. Each step he took within the alien colony felt heavier than the last. He had stayed, yes, but now the reality of what he had promised settled in. He was here to help heal a planet, an entire world that had been pushed to the brink of collapse. It was overwhelming. The queen had led him to the garden, showing him the dying plants and the fragile remains of a once thriving ecosystem. The more he saw, the more he realized just how fragile the situation was. These people had no time to waste. Their planet was on the edge of destruction, and if David couldn't help them, there was little hope left. It wasn't just their lives at stake. It was their entire species, their future. But David was no expert in agriculture or environmental science. He was a technician, a soldier. He had spent years fixing machines and fighting off invaders. He wasn't trained to save a dying world. The skills he had didn't seem to matter here. The weight of their expectations felt suffocating, and he could feel the pressure building inside him, every minute, every hour, as they waited for him to come up with answers. Despite the queen's unwavering belief in him, doubt gnawed at David's mind. What if he couldn't do it? What if his knowledge wasn't enough to turn things around? What if everything he tried failed? There were moments when he stood in front of the broken plants, unsure of where to even begin. The soil was dry and lifeless. The air around them was thick with the smell of decay, and no amount of adjustments or tinkering seemed to make a difference. He had tried fixing the irrigation systems, tested the soil for nutrients, and even adjusted the light sources in the hopes of sparking new life into the garden. But nothing worked. The plants remained still, withering away at a steady pace. David's frustration grew. His mind was always racing, trying to think of new ideas, new solutions, but nothing felt right. He began to feel like a failure. Each passing day only made him feel more helpless. There were no more battles to fight, no machines to fix. This wasn't about winning a war. This was about finding hope in the face of certain loss, and David wasn't sure how to do that. He began to avoid the queen. Every time he saw her, that look of hope in her eyes, it reminded him of how much he was failing, how much pressure he was under. She trusted him. They all trusted him, and he was terrified of letting them down. But he couldn't run forever. One evening, after another long day of fruitless work, David found himself standing outside the garden, staring up at the alien sky. It was vast and full of strange constellations, so different from Earth's familiar night. For a moment, he let the silence wash over him. The weight of his thoughts, the quiet hum of the colony, and the cold, unfamiliar air made everything seem even more isolated. His hand gripped the railing tightly, and a wave of self-doubt crashed over him. Maybe I should have just gone home, he thought. Maybe this was all too much. Maybe they needed someone else, someone with real answers, someone who wasn't so broken. Just as he was about to turn and head back to his quarters, he heard a voice. David. He looked up, startled, to see the Queen standing behind him. Her presence was calm, but there was an unmistakable concern in her expression. She didn't need to ask him what was wrong, she could see it in his face. He had always been the one to fix things, to protect others, but now it was clear that the weight of this task was breaking him. David didn't know what to say. His emotions felt like a tangled mess, and he couldn't find the words to express the doubts in his heart. Instead, he simply shook his head. I don't know if I can do this. The Queen stepped closer, her eyes softening. You are doing everything you can, I've seen it. I've seen the way you've worked, the way you've tried. But sometimes, David, doing the right thing doesn't mean doing everything perfectly. It means trying, even when the odds are against you. David looked at her, struggling to meet her gaze. But what if it's not enough? What if my best isn't enough? She reached out, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. Sometimes it's not about the results, it's about the effort, the willingness to keep going even when the end feels impossible. You have already done more than anyone else could have, but don't forget, no one can rebuild the world alone, not even me. David felt a tight knot in his chest loosen slightly. Her words, simple as they were, resonated with him. She wasn't asking him to be perfect. She was asking him to stay and try to keep moving forward, even if the path was unclear. The pressure didn't just lie on his shoulders. They were all in this together. They were all survivors just like him. I've been so afraid, David admitted quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been afraid of failing you, failing them. The Queen smiled faintly, her expression full of understanding. We all have our fears, David. Even I do. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we find strength in the fight, even if the battle seems endless. David took a deep breath. For the first time since he arrived on this world, he felt a shift inside him. The fear, the doubt, the overwhelming pressure, it didn't disappear, but it became more manageable. It wasn't just his fight anymore. It was their fight, and together they could find a way forward. I'll keep trying, David said, his voice stronger now. We'll figure it out together. The Queen nodded, a look of quiet pride on her face. That's all I ask. You are not alone in this, David. We will rebuild one step at a time. For the first time in days, David felt a spark of hope ignite within him. He wasn't alone. He didn't have to have all the answers. He just had to keep moving forward, and that was enough. And maybe, just maybe, together, they could heal not just the planet but themselves too. The days following David's quiet conversation with the Queen had been a turning point. The weight of the pressure hadn't vanished, but now there was a sense of purpose behind every task he set out to do. It wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about taking the small steps forward, one at a time. He wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for hope. David threw himself into his work with renewed focus. The garden with its withering plants was still his main concern, but now he understood something he hadn't before. It wasn't just about finding a quick solution. It was about learning, experimenting, and letting time take its course. He couldn't fix this world in a single stroke, and he knew that now. The world didn't need a quick fix. It needed healing, patience, and careful thought. The Queen had been right all along. No one could do it alone. The Queen often joined him in the garden, and slowly, a strange partnership began to form between them. She wasn't just the ruler of this broken world anymore. She had become a partner, a guide. Her wisdom, though often quiet, was a powerful force, and it helped David think in ways he hadn't before. She knew her people's needs better than anyone, and he began to realize that this wasn't just about applying human solutions to alien problems. This was about working together to understand and adapt. David started to collaborate with the alien workers, the ones who had been hesitant at first, unsure of his presence in their world. But with every step forward, their trust in him grew. Slowly, they began to open up, sharing their knowledge of their world's ecosystem, its resources, and its struggles. It wasn't much at first, but it was enough. The small exchanges, the quiet conversations, were beginning to build the foundation for something new. They had started small, adjusting the irrigation systems, testing the soil for new fertilizers, and carefully studying the plants that were still alive. It was a slow process, but with every plant that started to show signs of life, David felt his confidence grow. The change was subtle, but it was there. The garden wasn't going to be revived overnight, but the signs of progress were impossible to ignore. Still, David's thoughts often wandered back to Earth. He hadn't forgotten about the life he left behind, the people waiting for him, his family, his friends. He could still hear their voices in his head calling him back. It wasn't easy to ignore that pull, that longing for home. He had promised them he'd return. The shuttle was waiting for him. The door to the life he had known was still open. But every time David stood in front of the garden, watching the slow but steady growth of the plants, his mind grew quieter. Every time he worked alongside the queen and the people of her world, the weight of his doubts seemed to lift. This wasn't just a job. This was a mission. It was something deeper than what he had come here to do. He had found purpose in this place. But that didn't mean the decision was easy. Could he leave everything behind? Could he really stay here, in a world so different from his own, with people who had once been his enemies? The thought of never returning to Earth, of severing ties with everything he had known, left him with a pit in his stomach. There was no going back once he made this choice. The only thing left was to move forward. One evening, as David sat alone in the quiet of the colony, his mind heavy with questions, the queen approached him once again. She had been watching him carefully over the past few days. She knew the struggle within him. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the pull between his past and his present. "David," she said softly, sitting beside him, "you are a good man. You have shown us strength, wisdom, and patience. But there is one thing I need you to understand. You don't have to choose between your past and your future. You can have both. Earth will always be there and it will always be a part of you. But this world needs you now. It needs your heart, your hands, and your hope. What you do here, what you help us create, will matter. You are helping to build something that will last." David looked at her, her words sinking deep into his heart. He had spent so much time thinking about what he was leaving behind that he had forgotten to think about what he could build here. This wasn't just a broken world. It was a world that could be reborn. With each step, with each plant that grew, with each person who put their trust in him, he could see a future taking shape. A future he could be a part of. "But what if I'm not enough?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I can't help you all the way? What if this world can't be saved?" The queen's gaze softened. "No one can save an entire world alone, not even me, but we can do it together. We will rebuild not in one day, but in many. You are not here to carry the weight of the world. You are here to help us carry it. And that's enough." David sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling around him. He wasn't here to be the hero. He wasn't here to fix everything by himself. He was here to help, to build, and to grow alongside these people. That was enough. The queen's faith in him had never wavered, and now David realized he was starting to have faith in himself. He didn't need to have all the answers. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to keep moving forward just like they all did. David took a deep breath and turned to face her fully. "I'm staying," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I'm not going back to Earth, not yet. There's work to be done here." The queen smiled, a look of pride in her eyes. "You've made the right choice." For the first time since he arrived on this world, David felt peace. He wasn't leaving. He wasn't going back to the life he once knew. He was staying, and in doing so, he was becoming a part of something bigger than himself. This world, these people, they weren't just the ones who needed saving. They were the ones who could save him too. Together, they could rebuild. Together, they could create something beautiful. And for the first time, David knew that he had found a new home. David had made the decision to stay. It wasn't a choice that came easily, but it was the right one. Now, with every passing day, he threw himself deeper into the work that lay ahead. No longer burdened with the idea of returning to Earth, he could finally focus all his energy on helping the alien world heal. The garden, once a symbol of decay and hopelessness, was starting to show small signs of life. The plants, though still fragile, were beginning to bloom. Their colors were faint at first, barely noticeable, but David could see it. He could feel the change in the air, the shift in the atmosphere. Something was growing, something that hadn't been there before. David was no longer alone in his efforts. The Queen, once a distant and powerful figure, had become a close ally in this healing process. She worked alongside him in the garden, her hands gently tending to the plants, her mind always focused on the future. There was a quiet strength in her presence, something steady and unwavering. She wasn't just the ruler of this world anymore. She was a partner in every sense. The alien workers, who had been so cautious when David first arrived, now followed his lead with growing trust. At first, they had doubted him. After all, what did a human know about their world's ecosystems? But now, as they saw the changes, as they saw the garden beginning to recover, they started to believe. And that belief spread like roots reaching deep into the soil, anchoring them to something greater. David's role had evolved. No longer just a technician or soldier, he had become a teacher, a guide. He taught the workers about Earth's agricultural practices, about the balance between nature and technology, about how to nurture the land and make it thrive again. And in return, they taught him about their world, its history, its culture, its deep connection to the land. He was no longer an outsider. He had become a part of this world. But as much as things were improving, David knew that this was only the beginning. There was still so much to be done. The planet's environment was still unstable, and many of the other systems were in disrepair. The war might have been over, but the scars it left were deep and widespread. The healing process would take time, more time than David could have imagined when he first agreed to stay. One evening, as the sun set over the alien horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange, David found himself standing in front of the garden. The plants were thriving now, full of color, their leaves thick and healthy. There was a quiet joy in David's chest as he watched the transformation. This wasn't just about fixing something broken. It was about bringing something new to life, something that could endure. The Queen appeared beside him, standing silently for a moment, watching the garden as well. The silence between them was comfortable, as if words weren't necessary. They both understood the significance of the moment. "This is just the beginning," David said softly, breaking the quiet. The Queen nodded. "Yes, but it's a good beginning, a strong one." David smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "It's amazing what can happen when people work together. I never imagined I'd be part of something like this." "You've given us more than we ever expected," the Queen replied. "You've shown us that even in the darkest times there's always hope, and that hope can grow just like these plants, slowly, steadily, with care and patience." David glanced at her, meeting her eyes. In that moment, he saw not just the queen of a broken world, but a woman who had fought for her people, who had given everything to protect them, even when it seemed like there was no future left. She had led them through the darkest times, and now, together, they were creating a new future. "I didn't do it alone," David said quietly. "We did it together, you, your people, and me." The Queen smiled, a soft, genuine smile. "We all did, and we will continue to do so together." David nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over him. There was still much work to be done, and the road ahead was long. But for the first time, he felt like they could make it. They could heal, rebuild, and create something beautiful out of the ashes of war. It wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen, one step at a time. As the stars began to twinkle in the dark sky above, David allowed himself to feel a small spark of hope. This world, this people, had given him a new purpose. And for the first time since he had arrived, he realized that this was where he belonged. He had found his place, not just in the garden but in the hearts of the people he had come to care for. The journey was far from over, but together they would see it through. And in that thought, David found something stronger than the fear or doubt that had once plagued him. He found a sense of belonging, and that made all the difference. The days had turned into months, and slowly the world around David was changing. The garden, once a symbol of death and decay, had blossomed into a thriving ecosystem. Bright, vibrant plants stretched toward the sky, their colors vivid and full of life. It wasn't just the garden that had transformed. Everything around him seemed to be healing. The people, the land, and even David himself. David had learned to see the world through a different lens. He had come here to fix machines, to help secure a colony. But now it was no longer about just survival. It was about rebuilding. It was about bringing hope to a broken world. The queen stood beside him, her eyes watching the garden, the plants swaying gently in the breeze. There was a quiet pride in her gaze, and for the first time, David saw her not just as a leader, but as a person who had fought, lost, and now stood at the edge of something new. "Look at it," she said, her voice soft, filled with awe. "We've come so far." David smiled, his heart swelling with emotion. "I never thought it could happen. When I first arrived, everything felt so hopeless. But now, look at this place. It's like a dream coming to life." The queen turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "It's not just the plants, David, it's the people. They've started to believe again. They've started to hope again. You've given them that." David shook his head. "No, this was all of us. You led them through the darkness, and together we've made it this far. You showed me what strength really looks like. I just helped guide them along the way." The queen smiled faintly. "And you gave them something they didn't know they needed. You gave them your humanity. You showed them that it's not enough to just survive. They needed to learn how to live again, how to thrive." David felt the weight of her words. She was right. His time here had taught him more than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being there when someone needed you, showing up even when it felt impossible. It was about fighting for the future, not just for survival. They had rebuilt the garden, but now the true work had begun. The queen had entrusted David with more than just the garden. She had trusted him with their future. They were working on systems to repair the planet's environment, building new technology to restore balance to their world. They had made so much progress, and yet there was still so much to do. But David no longer felt overwhelmed. He no longer felt like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders alone. He had the support of the queen, the trust of her people, and the shared goal of making this world a place worth saving. Every day, they worked together, side by side, building not just a new world but a new way of life. One evening, after another long day of work, David found himself standing on a hill overlooking the colony. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, and the stars were beginning to appear, flickering in the vast expanse above. He felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. It was the kind of peace that came from knowing he had made the right choice. He had stayed, and in staying, he had found something he never expected: a family. The people here weren't just strangers or enemies anymore. They were his people. Their struggles were his struggles. Their victories were his victories. The queen appeared beside him, her silhouette outlined against the fading light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The quiet beauty of the moment was enough. "You've done more than anyone could have asked, David," the queen said, her voice gentle but firm. "You've given us more than hope. You've given us a future." David looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I didn't do it alone. You were there every step of the way. Without you, none of this would have been possible." She nodded, her expression softening. "We needed each other, and now we've built something that will last, something that will survive." David looked out over the colony, his heart swelling with pride. This world, once on the brink of destruction, had been given a chance, and it wasn't just the land that had healed. It was the people. Together, they had risen from the ashes, creating something stronger, more united. "I never imagined this would be my life," David said, his voice filled with wonder. "I thought I was just coming here to fix things, but now I realize that this was never just about fixing machines. This was about fixing lives. It's about building something better, not just for us, but for the future." The Queen smiled, her eyes shining with something close to affection. "You've done just that, David. You've built something better. You've built hope." The two of them stood together in silence, watching as the first stars began to shine in the sky above. There was so much left to do, so many more challenges ahead. But for the first time, David wasn't afraid. He wasn't scared of the unknown. He knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the night settled in, David realized that he had found something he never thought he would: purpose. He had come here with nothing but a mission, but now he had everything he needed: the trust of those around him, the respect of the Queen, and a future that was worth fighting for. He was no longer a stranger on a distant planet. He was home,